Well, Michael Doran, great friend of Outsiders, former defense and Middle East advisor to the Bush administration and senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. And prior to that, he was at the Brookings Institution as an expert on Middle East politics. In a foreign affairs article he wrote called Somebody Else's Civil War, Mike wrote, he argued that September 11th attacks were part of a religious conflict within the Muslim world and that Osama bin Laden, hoping the US retaliation would unite the faithful against the West, sought to spark revolutions in Arab nations and elsewhere, and that war with America was never the end result, but was just a means to promote radical Islam. Mike, welcome back to Outsiders. How are you?
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Now, do you still agree with the analysis of that brilliant man there that I just quoted, Mike Doran himself? Your thoughts?
Oh, thanks. Well, I wrote that about 20 years ago, so but I think it holds up well. At the time, everybody was arguing about, why do they hate us? And I made the point that it's not that they hate us, it's that they're fighting each other and they want to use the conflict with us to gain power over each other. I'm not sure that we have fully absorbed all that means, but I think the piece holds up. But unfortunately, they're succeeding at the moment in Kabul. Those images coming out of Afghanistan are really disheartening, as I'm sure you agree.
So, Mike, tell us your take on Afghanistan, Biden's culpability, Trump's culpability. Tell us the big picture and what your fears or hopes for the future.
Well, Biden is absolutely culpable. I mean, this is happening on his watch. But I think that we can all see that the will of the American people to fight that war is flagging. And that was already expressing itself through Trump. I don't believe Biden is saying that his hands are tied by the agreement that Trump made, and that Donald Trump would have done the same thing. I don't actually think that's true. I watched very closely in the Middle East while Trump pulled back and then took actions like killing Qasem Soleimani. Trump likes to win. Trump is very concerned about images like we're seeing coming out of Kabul right now. So it's true that Trump wanted to withdraw, but I don't think he would have withdrawn in this wholly shambolic manner, which is really detrimental to the prestige of the United States and indeed of the entire West. But we do have to absorb the fact that the American public no longer has the will to fight this war. I think this is the sad truth. I wish that we had defined our goals in Afghanistan much more clearly in a way that the American people could get behind. But that hasn't happened. We're not going to reverse this. We have to move on from here. And the big question here, there's, of course, the fact that this is going to be a shot in the arm for radical Islam, no doubt about that, radical Islam globally. But also the world has changed now. Pakistan and China are allies. Both of them are going to be using the Taliban to project power against India. This is going to have great ramifications for Central Asia. And the United States and the West in general, we have to get in the game of the great power competition game around Afghanistan, which we're really just not playing at the moment.
James.
Well, sure, Mike. I mean, you say all of that, and I understand that, but let's be honest. We don't wake up every morning and worry if there's going to be some mean tweet sent overnight that's going to start World War III, right? So, I mean, we've got that over the Trump administration. But seriously, though, I want to ask you. You talked about the American people's will to fight, and my concern is, does the Pentagon have the will to fight? Because every week on this show, we talk about stories about how they're becoming, both more woke and more concerned about diversity targets and things like that than having a Navy that can maintain a fleet and, fight its enemies, and is also more interested in, fighting Trump supporters within its own ranks under the name of radicalism. Where is our military? Where's the U.S. military in terms of its warfighting capability, not just in terms of the great game between China and Pakistan, but if things get really kinetic, say, in the Western Pacific?
I still think the core of the military is it's the best in the world. And we have a highly trained and highly experienced military that can carry out the hardest missions in the world. I am, like you, I'm very concerned about the inroads that progressivism is making in the Pentagon, and indeed in every aspect of our life. I mean, they control now, the progressives, the commanding heights of the culture, and they are using that position to try to insert themselves everywhere, including in the military. But I think there has to be strategically, we have to do a mental shift. And when I say we, I mean really all of us. We had these grand experiments in Iraq and Afghanistan that didn't end well. And a lot of people in Washington, I'm concerned about, are continuing to give the same kind of advice that clearly no president is going to support it. We've now had 3 presidents, very different kinds of, very different individuals, very different worldviews from the left and from the right. And all of them have rejected the kinds of projects that we were engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think those of us who want to see a muscular America, or an America that's deeply engaged abroad, we have to learn that lesson, and we have to start defining our goals and our strategic goals and our military goals in a much more precise fashion.
Daisy.
Well, Mike, interestingly enough, Prime Minister Bennett of Israel has a meeting scheduled, I believe, this week with Joe Biden. I'm sure Joe Biden is not thrilled about the timing. How do you think that is going to pan out relative to what's just happened in Afghanistan?
Well, actually, I think Biden might welcome this meeting, because it's an opportunity for him, after having looked so incompetent last week. It's an opportunity for him to look like he's more of a statesman and in control, because Bennett is in a very odd position domestically in Israel. He's a right-wing politician who's leading a centrist and leftist coalition. I mean, he betrayed his own voters in order to become the prime minister, and so it's very important to him to have the appearance of good relations with Joe Biden, because he has to justify toppling Bibi Netanyahu. And so what he wants to do is say that I am bringing good relations with Washington, something that Netanyahu could never have done because he got too close to Donald Trump. So there's a kind of, both of them have I think both Biden and Bennett have a desire for smiling optics. Now, unfortunately, what that's going to mean on the Israeli side is that they're going to have to capitulate to Biden on the Iran question. It won't be an open capitulation, but the Biden administration is capitulating to Iran. It's engaging Iran all across the region on the ground, and it's trying to get back to the JCPOA. The only reason the Iran nuclear deal, the only reason it hasn't gotten back is because the Iranians aren't willing to take the deal. But now what they're trying to do in Washington is to kind of fudge it and come up with a sort of informal JCPOA. And they want the Israelis to sit down and shut up while they're doing this.
Well, Mike Doran, you mentioned that Donald Trump likes to win. He certainly won on the Abraham Accords, first-time peace in the Middle East. He won on putting the mullahs and the ayatollahs back in their box in Iran, and many other instances. Joe Biden seems to like to lose, so I'm not sure what the future holds for us. But thanks so much for coming on Outsiders, Mike, and giving us your insights. And we'll speak again soon. Thanks, mate.
Thanks for having me. I love to be on the show.